Okay, so I just said this, but I think I was muted while I said it. We tried to do these meetings as webinars to start the year because it seemed like an easier way to handle large groups of people. But what we really found, or what I found, was that it was really sort of alienating to talk at a computer, not have anybody, respond, or not even be able to look at anybody's faces. So no pressure to keep your screen on or to keep your video on. I know some of you are probably just listening in, and I appreciate your presence. I appreciate you being here. I do believe we've got over 100 people RSVPing to this meeting. So again, it could be a pretty good turnout. And I want to go ahead and get started. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you spending the morning with me. I want to take time for your questions at the end. It's obviously been a really remarkable year, but in the midst of this really remarkable year, there's a number of things that I've been thinking about. And one of my biggest frustrations has been to lead a great school and really feel like all I'm doing is staying afloat, right? And our school has been such a leader in the region for so many years that it feels like we're sort of treading water right now. And that's never a position that a leader or any educator wants to be in, because education is all about growth. It's all about taking that next step. It's always about constant measured improvement. And the pandemic has really made me feel a lot like we're dealing well with the problem in front of us, but it really is it's been a little bit frustrating. And so recently, as you recall, we had a faculty in-service. And in the run up to that in-service, I wanted to make sure that we were primed and ready to have a generative conversation about where we can go as a school, as opposed to focusing on COVID, focusing on the pandemic, focusing on the present. I really wanted to get the faculty thinking about, our school is going to be around after this thing subsides, right? And we're going to go on being leaders in the educational space, both in the city and also, I hope, in the region. And we're not going to do that if we just sit on our hands and wait, for the vaccine to arrive. And so I wanted to be as proactive as I possibly could be. And in doing so, I wanted to, as I said, I wanted to prepare the faculty for some really good meetings, some really good conversations about goal setting and what our priorities should be as we think about delivering on the Meadows promise. And what I wanted to do at that meeting with the faculty is have conversations about our core values that the board developed out of the longstanding traditional philosophy of the Meadows School, and how we can do an even better job of delivering on those core values. And so, in order to make sure that they were ready to go, I had a meeting with the leadership team, and the leadership team and I sort of sat down and said, how are we going to get people thinking about this? And I've got as I've got really excellent leaders. I'm really fortunate to be able to work with the academic division directors and the student-facing leadership team, as I call them, which includes counseling and arts and athletics. And in the midst of that meeting, it sort of came up that, well, maybe we need to help define for people what it is we want to get done. And I said, well, what do you mean, guys? Like, this is what we do every day. And frankly, I was a little bit taken aback by the notion that we had to define something, or we had to define for ourselves. And Mr. Siegel actually said to me, he said, Jeremy, we know, right? The directors know every day, right? This is the work we're doing constantly, but we don't have an opportunity, particularly in the pandemic, for the head of school to have a conversation with faculty, right? You can't get everybody together in the CFA and actually have a formative conversation. And so I said, you know what, that makes perfect sense. Let's go ahead and define for the faculty what we've been up to in the last 3 years, what we were actually aiming at for that entire time. And so what I did is I put together a presentation, and I did the presentation 4 different times, one for each academic division at one of their faculty meetings. And what I'd like to do is just really quickly run through that presentation with you. What it is meant to say, this is what we've been doing over the course of the past 3 years. This is what I hope for us to be able to get done in the next 3. But also, I hope that it provides a context, that it's not just, I wake up in the morning thinking about things to change or thinking about curveballs I can throw the community, right? The idea here is that we should have a series of North Stars, right? That we're aiming for as a team, as a whole community, as parents bought into the educational framework and faculty members who get what it is we're after. So that being the case, please bear with me here for a second, and I will share my screen. Okay, I can see Bob Bogner. Can you see my screen? Thumbs up. Thank you. Perfect. Okay, so this is the presentation as it was presented to the faculty, and it's titled 2020 Vision. And I really wanted them to understand that we're not interested in change for the sake of change, that everything that we do is supposed to aim at one of the foundational goals that I think have long been the goals of the institution. Long before I became head of school, I think that these were goals that the school shared. One is to put the Meadows School on the map as one of the premier institutions of the West. I think that our numbers, our graduation rates, our matriculations, where our kids go to college, our standardized test scores, all of these things illustrate that we're among the very best schools in the West, but our reputation hasn't caught up to that reality. I believe that the Meadows School ought to be named in the same breath as your Harvard Westlakes and your Lick Wilmerdings and your Lakesides in Seattle and Green Hill School in Dallas. In the West, we ought to be among the very finest schools that exist. And I think that we are, but it's all about building that reputation regionally. The second thing is that I want us to accept nothing less than excellence in every part of the Meadows experience. And what that means is, I don't believe, and you all have heard me say this before, I don't believe that you have to be bad at sports to be good at academics. I don't think that you have to have just good arts programming to be excellent at academics. I don't think that you have to sacrifice academics to focus on other areas. I think that we can walk and chew gum at the same time. I think that the Stanford model is absolutely fine for us to pursue, and that is excellence in academics, but also excellence in all of the other experiences that we offer kids. And that is honestly, as a side note, been part of the centerpiece of our response to the pandemic, is to really, whenever healthy and whenever possible, to provide kids with as much of the Meadows experience as we possibly can. So 3 is to make sure that the Meadows School assumes its rightful place as the educational leader of the broader Las Vegas community. I think that we are there, but I also think that our reputation could be a little bit burnished in terms of the larger Las Vegas community being proud that we're a member of this community. And that has to do with our outreach, that has to do with our efforts in terms of community service and making sure that people understand that we're a valid and valuable part of this community, not just a small school for kids in a certain part of the city. So every time we think about changes on campus, we're thinking about addressing one of these goals every time, right? And so as you sort of go into this, the implications of focusing on these changes is that changes are not considered without being viewed through this lens. We don't think in terms of this is going to be good for this year, or this is going to be good for this quarter. We really try to think in terms of, okay, how is this going to place us on the map? How is this going to impact our membership in the community? Or how is this going to benefit the entirety of the Meadows School program, and help us build on our legacy of excellence? The second piece of this is that everything that we've been doing, every person who is on our campus, and this was important for me to tell the faculty, everybody who's here right now, I believe, is helping us deliver on these goals. And finally, I wanted the faculty to understand that change will continue, that you cannot, in my view, pursue excellence without being willing to take a look at yourself and see where you can stand to improve. Again, it's the center of the educational project. You can't simultaneously pursue excellence and remain static. And we as a school will always choose to pursue excellence. So you look at changes and accomplishments over the course of the past 3 years. That was a sort of arbitrary line. Going back much further than that, the school is a little bit of a different place. So we have changed uniform policy so that all girls can wear pants. We've added school-wide traditions while remaining true to our ongoing traditions. We didn't get to have the pancake breakfast this year. We didn't get to have our homecoming barbecue, but those traditions are still very much a part of who we are. And we want to continue all of those traditions while adding new traditions to build Meadows pride. The board put together the first strategic plan revision in a decade, which I am incredibly proud of. And the strategic plan hangs, as you know, in every building. And the board is currently in the process of providing the first revision of that strategic plan, which was put together in 2018. So this is, again, from the board level, they're taking a look at the plan saying, okay, what have we gotten done? What are we gonna do? How would we like to go ahead and push the envelope in terms of our pursuit of excellence? We revised the mission and developed the core values as a board. That was also a really big piece for us to be forward-looking and make sure that we're serving the students that we currently accept. We have developed, we are in the process of developing a diversity, equity, and inclusion plan to deliver on that piece of the strategic plan that has to do with diversity. We've also added, every year, we added a $1,000 professional development stipend for faculty that they can use to take classes, to go to conferences, and so forth. So we're pleased about those all-school advancements. In the realm of advancement, we started the process of centralizing admissions, which we will do over the course of the next year, so that we don't have 4 different admissions policies, right? The goal here was to make sure that everyone who comes to the Meadows has a similar experience, regardless of whether they have a 6th grader or a 4-year-old. We want them to understand the Meadows method, the Meadows way of thinking about education. Also, we're doing a much better job of keeping track of our enrollment and admission numbers, so we can set benchmarks for how we can improve moving forward. We've seen a record freshman class in both the fall of 19 and 20. Those classes are 70 plus students. For the first time this year, we grew middle school classes beyond 60 because the board felt that there was a strategic opportunity for us to add a few students in the midst of the uncertainty provided by the pandemic. We hired the school's first PR and marketing person, and then began to appropriately market the school, which I think we've seen dividends there as we've seen our admissions numbers improve. This year we added a videographer to support our marketing approaches, but also we knew that the pandemic, the hybrid approach to learning, we were going to need somebody on campus who knew how to use video tools and to create assets for our educational process. We undertook a rebranding exercise to update our logos and language. We hired an advancement director, Heidi Lee, with a depth of experience in independent schools. Last year and this year put together in the midst of a pandemic, we raised over $300,000 for community relief, which I think is just remarkable. And it's a real testament to our community and you as parents and your willingness to support not just the school, but to support one another and make sure that the school thrives and that every family has the opportunity to continue receiving a Meadows education. And finally, we recently secured a $250,000 gift to support diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, including professional development for faculty. So we're thrilled. That is an endowment gift, which will live in perpetuity and will benefit our efforts to be the most inclusive school that we possibly can moving forward. In the business department, not always the most exciting stuff, but I'm really pleased with what we've been able to do in upgrading our business procedures. We began the practice of revising budgets quarterly, so we have a really clear picture of what our financial status is every 3 months. We developed the school's first 5-year financial plan, including we know where we will be financially if we see an increase in enrollment, whether it stays steady or whether we see a drop off. We've modeled out all of those things over the course of 5 years so that we're really clear on our financial stability, which actually looks really great. We have revamped the financial aid process, pulling the process forward 3 months so that financial aid families know what their bill is going to be before they sign up for school. We increased financial aid strategically, but that led to increased income, right? So that was not a decrease in income. The board approved a plan to increase financial aid in certain areas so that we were seeing more seats with more people paying tuition as opposed to allowing those seats to stay empty. And that has been a net tuition revenue approach that has really impacted positively our bottom line. We've moved our investment funds to a new partner. We just added a controller. Larry Schneiderman has started, and he's going to allow us to do more strategic work as he takes care of some of the day-to-day accounting. In terms of tech, we're getting started. I just hired an experienced tech administrator from a program out of Miami. He is going to start in January to help us deliver not only to the future, but right now. our ongoing hybrid and remote approaches. We want to make sure that we're best in class. So I added somebody to bolster our tech team. We are currently building out a vision for best-in-class approaches to technology and education, including infrastructure investments this winter. We had a good idea that our on-campus tech would work, but nobody in the industry knew just how much bandwidth it was going to take to run this many Zoom meetings. And so it's a little bit slower than we want. And so we're doing a major infrastructure investment over the holiday break to make sure that we have the speed and bandwidth necessary to continue doing the work that we need to do to make sure the kids keep getting a quality education. And also the board is looking at developing a teaching and learning space that will further utilize technology in the future. In terms of counseling, we hired the school's first head counselor. We also added a counselor to their ranks. We developed a high quality advisory program that we're seeing rolled out in middle and upper school. We're looking at the possibility and definitely evaluating what our social and emotional learning needs are in order to add a program that will help bolster our academic even further. So that's really pretty exciting. We're developing support plans and accommodations to better serve the students we accept. And when I say that, we haven't changed what we believe a Meadows student to be. We just want to make sure that we're serving every student regardless of how they come to us and the challenges that they bring. So we also, in that vein, developed harassment, intimidation, and bullying policies that are written into our student handbooks today. In the arts, we just added Michael Orman, who's an experienced administrator from a top school. He came from Greenhill, brings lots of knowledge to us. We've already expanded arts into lower school. So in addition to our great music program, we've also added dramatic and visual art programming to lower school and beginning school. Our vision is to never lose another mission appropriate art student, meaning every student who is academically capable and ambitious ought to be able to find a home at the Meadows, whether they're an actor or whether they're a painter or whatever else. That's the fundamental goal. We ought to be able to serve those students. We are already talking about adding film as a program, digital art, and dance. In terms of athletics, we've seen a huge shift, I think. Claude Gregersen came from a top school in Florida. We've seen training programs outside of our in-season activities to the point where we've got kids participating. Even before I had to shut them down because of the increase in COVID, we had nearly half of the upper school students were participating in after-school athletics, even though we don't have an athletic season going, right? So kids are excited, they're engaged, they're ready to be part of something. We had a great partnership going with a volleyball program. We're looking at adding a basketball program. We have our own tennis program. We'd like to continue to build these partnerships, utilize our facilities, and expose new students to our programming. We have seen an increase of on-campus coaches to 86%. I think we were around 30 or 40% before Mr. Gruber arrived. And that's a huge deal to have somebody who gets the Meadows experience and who gets us philosophically being coaches for these teams. Doesn't mean lowering the standard of our coaching. It means making sure that we're able to do both, that we have high quality teachers who can also provide high quality coaching experiences. That number has also grown in the middle school. We have eliminated the outside PE credit, which means that a student wants PE credit, they need to do PE on our campus, either as taking a class or playing in a sport for the Meadows School. We've hired Charles Sams, a human performance coordinator, and we're growing the human performance philosophy to an all-school effort. We'd like to see pre-K through 12 engaged and monitor these kids as they grow and make sure that they are physically fit, and because we know that students who are physically fit do a better job in the classroom. They're better students overall. They feel better, and it promotes their overall wellness, which is what we're engaged in here. So our philosophy has shifted to, rather than focusing on the athletes who are really interested, we develop all student athletes regardless of ability in the same way that we do in the classroom. We don't just say, oh, you're having trouble, I'm going to go ahead and focus my energies on the brightest kids or the kids who are having the easiest time. We make sure that every Meadows kid gets the appropriate training and gets the appropriate attention. And so we're going to do that in athletics as well. Beginning school, this looks like a short list, but man, we've seen change. We expanded, maybe that was 5 years ago, to offer a full day program, which has just been remarkable in terms of the number of families that have come to us. We've seen expansion of the building as a result. The Sherwing was added as a result of just the numbers that we had in, and it allowed us to build our numbers for kindergarten, meaning that we can have 45 plus, maybe even 50 students coming from our beginning school ready to start kindergarten with us. And that means that our recruitment efforts we don't have to try to recruit 30, 40, 50 kids to kindergarten. And we're already trying to begin to offer summer camp experiences. In lower school, we were successful in recruiting a veteran of some great schools with 20 years experience. Laura has done a great job thus far, even under difficult circumstances. We moved away from the ribbon wall without moving away from time tests. We want to try to focus students on next generation skills, which means critical thinking, thinking hard about problem solving as opposed to simply speed, right? We want them to both be capable of doing math time tests, but also to be able to slow down, think hard, and develop problem solving skills. We're moving toward the development of SEL skills and the adoption of a curriculum. SEL, of course, meaning social and emotional learning, which is really, those of you who are not familiar with that, is really simply an approach to thinking about some of the stuff that are cornerstones of the Meadows experience, which is, emotional well-being, which is self-control, which is how to be a good friend, how to be a good citizen in your school, understanding that if you have quality SEL and interpersonal skills, you have good self-control and good self-awareness, you're gonna be a better academic student, and that's what we're after here. We've added a learning specialist this year for the first time to make sure that students who find a bump in the road or struggle a little bit, that we're able to keep those students if they are in fact mission appropriate kids for our school. Let's see, I think I just jumped over middle school. Let's see, there it is. We revised the schedule last year and allowed everybody to get PE and sports at the end of their day, meaning that they didn't have to do sports until 5 o'clock, then maybe have a game and then maybe get to their homework. We want those 12 and 13-year-olds, those middle school students, to be able to knock out some of their sports at the end of the school day and get to bed on time. We're adding differentiation in math and languages so that students who come to us who've never seen Spanish before are not put in a class with students who have had 7 years of Meadows Spanish. So we're actually addressing really great students, quality students when they come to us. We have been able to increase student government participation just by tenfold over the course of the past 3 years. I really take my hat off to Mr. Siegel and his staff. These kids are deeply engaged in their school. We planned a trip to DC for middle school students. And we're going to go ahead and do that trip as soon as the pandemic eases and we're allowed to travel with students again. In the upper school, we've added advanced topics classes, which mean that we can teach college level work that isn't necessarily defined by the AP program, right? So that we're not beholden to standardized tests, but we can stretch students in different college level areas. We added Algebra 1 so that we weren't losing students who, through no fault of their own, hadn't seen Algebra 1 before. Those students are still able to graduate with pre-calc. We've added engineering, robotics, drones, and coding. We've enhanced the focus on the positive student experience, and that means clubs, societies, extracurriculars. We really want to focus on kids having a positive experience overall because we think that helps them in the classroom. We added Learning Lab for freshmen and student athletes, meaning that there's a place for them to go every day after school. They can get help from their faculty members. Freshman student athletes, in fact, are required to go to Learning Lab after school so that they can make sure to get their homework done, get everything turned in so that they can be effective student athletes. We added student leadership class, meaning that if you are in student council, you have a class, and that has actually expanded the footprint of the student experience so that they can actually plan for dances, plan for different activities and events without, eating into their after school time. College counseling now 4 years ago, students had to do all their college applications, all their college prep and everything else outside school. We've added that to the school day so that those students can, under the watchful eye of our counselors, actually get that work done so that they're ready to apply to their top colleges without eating into their homework and study time, without eating into their academic or I'm sorry, their athletic or arts time. We added college trips to the junior class. All of those kids get to go to a series of colleges and learn about them. We sent kids to DC. And last year, we sent sophomores to Puerto Rico for the first time on a service learning trip. We added freshman fun week programming to really gel that freshman class and get them excited about school. We're building out capstone programs so that seniors have an opportunity to illustrate what they've learned over the course of their time at the Meadows. And we're expanding the expectation of off-campus community service, meaning we are limiting the amount of service that kids can get on our campus. Now, it's obviously been more difficult in the pandemic to see that, but we've seen kids do more in the community as opposed to simply doing work here and there on campus. And so finally, that's sort of where we've been over the course of the past 3 years. I've got my notes here, so I'm going to stop my sharing, talk a little bit with you about where we're going. Let's see. We've got a campus master plan that we would like to see. I just lost my, sorry. Let me just do this from memory then. I lost my notes, but we've got a campus master plan that includes, hopefully, the possible addition of a gym space to the lower school. We'd like to expand the upper school. We're looking at, like I said, it's a science and arts tech space that might replace these old administration buildings. We've got ideas for expanding the upper school library so that it can be a more effective tech and learning space. In addition to that, we're constantly looking at how we can enhance our footprint, how we can continue to attract the very finest faculty moving forward. And so what happened as a result of this is I gave this presentation to the faculty to really try to focus them and say, look, every time we make changes, it's all because we want to serve one of these three. And on that Monday that we took off, we divided up into groups. We had groups that were addressing different pieces of our core values and coming up with real actionable items saying, here are suggestions that we can actually do as a staff, as a faculty, as a school to drive us forward in being better at delivering on our core values. How do we build out discovery? How do we build out character? How do we think hard about inclusion and really deliver on this stuff as opposed to saying, these are words that we put in our literature, but how do we actually live them, right? And so I was really proud that the faculty came up with 4 items in each of the 5 core values. So we have 20 actionable items that were delivered to us by the faculty. And we have a plan for moving forward and trying to prioritize and address those things in the next 2 years. So I think it was a really successful day for us and for the faculty. And it was refreshing to not think about pandemic stuff, right? To not think about COVID testing and not think about quarantines and really think about why it is we do what we do, which is because we're deeply invested in the success of children. And we got to get back to that instead of feeling afraid. We had small groups of teachers masked, distanced in classrooms. And then, we came together in somewhat larger groups and larger spaces, but again, totally distanced. And so it was nice to do some stuff in person as well for a change for many of us. So anyway, that was the upshot of our time that we spent on our in-service day. And so I'm happy to answer your questions. I got actually one question emailed to me that I want to address out loud because I think it's a good one. A parent emailed me to ask whether I had heard anything about the governor moving to shut down private schools. The board and I are keeping a close eye on that. We have a board meeting Thursday in which we will discuss possible responses, but no one has any firm indication that the governor's office is going to make such a move. I think that we've seen, a handful of positive cases on our campus. We have not detected any spread of the virus on our campus, right? So the people who have it have contracted it elsewhere, and we're not seeing people pass it around our campus. Therefore, it would not stand to reason. You never know with the government, but it wouldn't stand to reason for them to shut us down. So I haven't heard anything yet, but we are working out contingency plans if that is the case. We would rather stay in person. And really quickly, our philosophy, we've operated under 3 guiding principles. And I think I put this in an email recently. But the 3 guiding principles in the pandemic were 1, health and safety, risk mitigation, right? We want to make sure we provide the safest environment we can. 2, we want to keep the school open because we believe in-person education. We believe that that's better for kids. We believe that's better for families. We believe that's better for the educational project. All things are a little bit better if you can have kids in the room. And then finally, we want to do everything we can to deliver on the entire Meadows experience. If that means sports, if that means arts, if that means extracurriculars and clubs, we're trying to do everything we can. And sometimes number 1 outbalances number 3, right? And sometimes number 1 can get so risky that it outbalances number 2, meaning that sometimes you have to close, sometimes you have to move to hybrid learning in the upper school, sometimes you have to take steps to make sure that the kids are safe, because that's number 1. But balancing those 3 things have been the center of what we've been after this year. I've been really proud of the staff, really proud of the students. They've been really remarkable just in following the rules and doing the things that we ask of them. And I think that's why I think that your diligence as parents and these kids' diligence in following the rules has really impacted our ability to stay open. We've developed, unfortunately, the ability to quickly quarantine groups and to keep everybody as healthy as we can. And I hope we can continue. We take it, a week at a time, and, we'll get to Thanksgiving and we'll keep working and we'll get to the holiday break and, see what happens with these vaccines that are under development. So that is what I have. Do you have any questions for me? You can either, I think you're allowed to unmute yourself. I'm happy to just have you just unmute yourself, or you can do the hand raising. And I can unmute you, or you can put it in the chat if you have any questions. Thank you, Ms. Domboli. I appreciate the kind words in the chat, thanking us for everything we're trying to do. I appreciate the families. I think that the dedication of this group, of the entire school, to trying to keep us together, and the faculty coming together and understanding how important it is to try has been really remarkable. I'm feeling pretty humbled by the fact that we've been as successful as we've been. The winter is going to be a difficult time, given flu season and the rest, but I really appreciate how well the entire community has worked to keep us as safe as we can. We are, incidentally, I'm going to get an email out today. Our next steps in risk mitigation, we're moving to a pool testing model. So instead of testing half the faculty every other week, we're going to be testing the faculty every week. And then we're going to be expanding to testing all student athletes every week, right? And so, for some sports, we'll actually develop a protocol where we're actually testing students multiple times a week so that they, so we lower the risk of them actually bringing back from interscholastic play any exposure. In addition to that, we are looking at air filtration systems. We already run our HVAC systems constantly. They run 24/7 so that our upgraded filters are constantly filtering the air. But we're also looking at adding air filters to all the classrooms in addition. And my hope is that that'll be in place before the end of the calendar year. So we're constantly going, right? We're not going to stop and say, hey, we've had a good run, this is enough. We're going to keep adding to our safety measures as we move forward. All right. Well, if there are no further questions, you guys know how to reach me. Please feel free to email me directly. I have a question here really quickly before I sign off. Will you be testing the class before they are sent home? As teachers are testing positive, let me read the entire question. Our classes are going home to remote learning. will you be testing the class before they are sent home so as to minimize at-home infection to others and before they come back? We are not going to be testing kids, but as they leave, right? We're quarantining is really about, you have the possibility of exposure. That does not mean that you're necessarily infected. So we are not going to test kids as they go out. We have successfully tested kids while they are out, right? So we've done the pool testing before they come back to school to try to protect the larger group community. This is going to be difficult right now with any groups that are going out. Any groups that are going out right now, we're going to try to work with them, but the Thanksgiving holiday is making this very difficult, right? To do it in the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, up, you know, in front of the return to school on November 30th. So we're looking into this, but in a normal time, yes, we test kids before they come back to school from quarantine. Another question, somebody asked about multiple positives for one person. Do you want to address? I don't know what that means. About multiple positives for one person. I don't know if I know of a case where that has happened. I'm just going to jump to the next question. If anybody has a question about any of those specifics, please reach out to me. Our handbook is pretty clear on this stuff, and unfortunately, I've gotten pretty good at being able to answer these questions for us. Has there been any considerations for going remote the 2 weeks after Thanksgiving break and returning after winter break? Yeah, there has been consideration. Here's my issue though. If we go remote after Thanksgiving, my guess is that there's a sizable part of the population that will actually stay on vacation, right? That will actually be in a riskier space than they would be if they were on campus 8 hours a day with our protocols. So yeah, that would be a possibility, but we're going to try to have in-person learning as much as possible. Again, as you line up the priorities, 1 is health and safety. Yes. 2 is in-person learning. And that's my second priority. And we're going to try to engage in as much in-person learning as we can. So we will obviously be doing testing and monitoring in the weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And obviously in the weeks following the holiday break, and do the best that we can, again, to monitor the situation. But since the pandemic began in March, and we have seen definitely under 10, and I think 8 positive cases out of 1,000 individuals on our campus. So thus far, we've done a pretty good job of keeping kids safe. Are there fewer students coming to school now than a couple weeks ago? Yes. Yeah, I mean, everybody has different levels of risk tolerance, and we're seeing some families say, you know what, the numbers in the community are making me nervous. Or we've seen a number of people who are medical professionals saying, look, I have exposure. I don't want to send my exposure to school with my child. So they're going remote. But by and large, the school is still very vibrant. The kids are still coming to school. The upper school is a little lighter because we've gone hybrid. So we've got half the kids on, half the kids off. But nevertheless, we're doing everything we can. And my hope is that we start to see this spike in our community subside, so that following Thanksgiving, we can get back to on the track that we were and have more kids on campus rather than fewer. So we'll be monitoring the situation. Okay. Well, thank you guys. Thank you so much for your time and your energy, your support of the school. We really appreciate it. Email me, call me, let me know what you're thinking, what your issues might be. And I appreciate you being here. I'm going to answer one last question about testing prior to return from winter break. And if you'd like to hear that, stay on. Otherwise, I will talk to you sometime soon, I hope. Are we going to test prior to return from winter break? That is something that I'm working on. I would love to do, and I would love to have every single person on campus tested so that we can have a clean bill of health when we return. There are difficulties with that, logistical difficulties, but also difficulties regarding protocol. Because if you saw exposure in the last 3 days of your holiday break, no test is going to pick up that exposure. So that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, right? But if we can get the vast majority of people to commit to being safe, staying in your bubble in your family unit for the last 5 days of Christmas break, then having a test the Sunday prior, or even, going remote half day on Monday and having a drive-through situation where we pool test everybody. We'll be looking at developing that, because I think it'd give a lot of people a lot of peace of mind to know, hey, we've tested everybody on campus. We know that everybody's clean for the moment. Let's get back to school. So thank you for your question, Rebecca. Again, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. If you have follow-ups, please feel free to reach out to me directly. Thank you.